Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Financial Independence Through Small Multifamily Investing. I'm your host, Lawrence Latty, also known as Mr. International. We meet here every Tuesday at 7 p.m. to help each other learn to grow personally and financially through small multifamily investing. Tonight, I have a very special guest. My guest is from North Carolina. Called North Kakalaka. And she's from Charlotte, right? I met her when I first started Meetup in 2021. She came on, she's coming on, and I've seen her growth, right? She recently just, should I say retired or quit? What should I say? What should
I
I
don't
say?
know. Quit is probably
Quit. Okay,
stronger.
fine. She
I didn't
recently quit her
retire from the
job.
workforce, so
Okay, retired from the workforce, quit from the workforce, right? To be an investor full time. And this year already, she has there's three properties she closed on so far this year, right?
two. Yeah.
Two. I know
Yeah. I
she
sold
did
I sold another. I sold another two, but I
that's what it
also
was.
yeah, that's
Okay.
probably
So
what it
she
was.
bought
Yeah.
two, sold one, and once she did a 29-unit building in South Carolina, correct?
Yep.
South Carolina, and she didn't syndicate it. She did it all by her lonesome with her husband. She's also a mother of one, son seven. You got two? I thought you had one.
I got a girl too. She's 4.
Oh, she's four. Okay, well, there you go. So I didn't read the whole bio. I was so excited. I didn't read the whole bio.
Sorry, Lauren.
So she has a son of seven, a daughter of four, right? And I bring to you my special guest. It's always good to see you, Rachel. She came to my mastermind dinner in Charlotte, right? I just want to say I appreciate you coming on
Mhm.
tonight, taking time for your family. Congratulations, and the floor is yours, Rachel.
Thank you. No, I'm really happy to be here. I started coming to this meetup 2 years ago now, maybe something like that, and it was really helpful. I mean, I started out when I was first getting into syndications and into figuring out commercial properties at all. And it was really helpful. The group's just everybody's just so nice and I love the conversations that happen here. It's really nice. Um, so Lawrence asked me to talk a little bit about this 29 unit I got. Maybe a little bit of my background first. So I came from engineering. I've got a master's in engineering, mechanical engineering, and I worked for 15 years at a Fortune 500 company. I full time, I went slowly on a very long off ramp. When my daughter was born, I went to 32 hours, which is still full time. So I still got benefits. I did that for about 3 years. And then last year, I dropped down to 20 hours. I went to contractor. And then there's just this past year, I dropped off completely and said, yep. Or just this past month, I said, I'm out, I'm done. So I was very, very lucky to get that kind of long off ramp. Not everybody does that, but I enjoyed what I was doing too. So I was getting that stuff out of it. My work still wanted whatever time they could get out of me, which was really, really nice to hear. So it worked out really well for everybody. But yeah, now I'm doing real estate full time. I started out in real estate in single families. So my husband and I we started when our son was being born. He's 7 now, and we just wanted a backup plan. Like, we're both in the same industry, working in the energy industry. And in 2016, that went like everybody was getting fired. We didn't know what we were gonna do if we both got fired at the same time. Like, that was gonna be bad. So we found two little single families that were being sold together. And quite honestly, it was a these cannot fail situation. They were 20 grand a piece, and they were worth more being burned down by a tenant than they were standing if something happened. So we got them. We fixed them up ourselves. There was a lot of babies out. Like, I had my baby carrier out there doing baseboard and plumbing and electrical, all the works. So I did a lot of hands-on stuff, learned a lot of lessons, everything from subfloor to tiling to finish work. So I'm not an expert at any of it, but I know enough to be dangerous with the contractors at least. From there, we kind of bought a property a year, got into a triplex, then got into a 6 unit. Then I was like, oh, this is 6 units kind of nice. Like, it's one building, one roof, but I get like the likelihood that I'm not going to get paid any given month is a lot lower than a single family. And about then is when I started thinking, okay, maybe we can go bigger than this. Um, yeah, so I've got, yeah, I started doing a lot of these meetups, including this one. I was pretty regular for a while, and I kind of dropped off past 6 months because I've just been so slammed, and there's just been a lot going on. But I'm happy to come on here and kind of share my story going from where I'm at now, where I started at, to now where we got this 29 unit. And I kind of wanted to talk through how we got it, because it's in this kind of a market. A lot of people are like, well, we can't buy anything. The interest rates are crazy and there's nothing to buy. And then just kind of talk through what I looked at to be sure I wanted to go after it, and maybe a little bit into why I ended up getting it on my own rather than on a syndication. So are there any questions on any of that before I keep going? Okay. All right. So the one I'm going to talk about today is down in Columbia. It's a 29 unit. It is, let's see. Lawrence, can I share my screen on here?
Hold
Is that
on.
okay?
Yeah.
It'll be easier. Pictures always make everything more fun. Just saying.
Definitely. I don't know what. Yeah, it's everything froze.
But this is actually it was an on-market deal. It was from Marcus and Millichap, which is a big broker. Like there was this had been under contract 2 times before I got to it. It had all the indications of why on earth is anybody going to buy this thing? Because if other people haven't bought it, then why would I? And I looked at it. This is my first property in Columbia. So I had to go research the market in heavy detail before anything. But this was brought to me by another broker that I'd worked with before. And he said, hey, I think this is interesting. And I looked at it, and the property itself is nice. But it just had been distressed. Like the previous owner didn't put any money into it. Yep, Columbia, South Carolina. Yeah, not the country. Sorry. Yeah, I'm not that crazy yet. Good question. Maybe one day. I know somebody who has a coffee farm down in Columbia, the country. And it's like, that's past me right now. So this is South Carolina. So for me, it's about hour 45 minutes from my house. So I still can drive there. Like I can do a day trip down there. It's a long drive, but I like having stuff that's close by to me. I'm just that hands-on personally. Anyway, so I found this property. The broker brought it to me and said, hey, I think this is interesting. I went down there to look at it, and it's super distressed, right? Like the structure itself is fine. But the tenant base, like it clearly hasn't been managed very well. They haven't put any money into doing any kind of upgrades. And it kind of just been overlooked for about 10 years, where, to give you an example, like the laundry room had flooded, it had backed up from the sewer about 2 years prior, and they just shut the doors and left it. So that kind of tender love and care had been gone into this for a while. But what I liked about it was the location of it was a block away from where Columbia City had been reinvesting in North Main Street. So they just widened that whole road up. They added bike lanes, they added sidewalks, they added crosswalks. They've been they essentially been investing a lot of money a block away from this thing. And so I started looking at it more deeply. I was like, okay, well, the city's done the research to say this is where we think businesses are going to want to move into. Maybe there's something there about the location that makes it worth going after. Oh, good. I can share now. Okay, here. Hey, can you see us now?
There you go.
Yeah, good. Okay. My eyes are going to shift back and forth now because camera's over here and stuff's on the screen. But all right, so this is kind of what it looks like. This is the offering memorandum from the selling broker. So this is what it looked like before I got it. And I closed on it in June. So I started negotiating on this back in February of last year. So it took a really long time. That's definitely more than your standard 90-day due diligence period. We can get into that a little bit. But yeah, this is what it looked like when I won it. So it doesn't look that bad. Like generally they just put new siding on it. Windows are newer. And I just started looking at it and saying, you know what, there's not anything major here. Like there's little things that haven't been taken care of, but mainly it was the tenant base that hadn't been taken care of. Tenants where no work orders were being responded to. The property manager had kind of given up on it because the owner wouldn't give him any money to fix anything. And you look at the financials that go with it, and you like, it'd been losing money the past 2 years. And like, it was like, okay, well, this looks like a terrible investment. Like, why on earth would you buy something that's been losing money for 2 years, and has distressed stuff? But they were renting it out for anywhere between 545 a month to 725 a month for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath in Columbia, where the average rent for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath is 900. So it's like, okay, that's a big jump. Like between the two, on top of that, they have low vacancy. So, or they had really high vacancy. And so it was a question of, all right, well, can I manage this better? And just by virtue of like treating the tenants like people, getting stuff like minor stuff fixed, getting them happy to live there, and doing some other things to it. So the more I looked at this, the more I liked it. I'm like, okay. So I put in an offer. I actually put in a full priced offer up top. They were asking 2.2 million on it. I put in a full priced offer because I thought like they had already tried to discount it for the distress. And I was like, okay, well, I looked at the rents, it seemed fine. Once we started getting due diligence though, there was definitely some issues that I had to go back and renegotiate on. So one of the things I always do when I do a contract is there's a lot of clauses in the contract that help me have some amount of flexibility after getting it under contract. One of those that I was able to not really leverage exactly, but use as a means to negotiate was that if I found anything that was wrong, that was under or was going to be over $100,000 to fix, then I get my earnest money, my due diligence money, like all my hard money, I get back because it was something that wasn't disclosed by the seller that they should have known about, and it's a big deal. And in this case, we found aluminum wiring on the property. If you don't know, aluminum wiring is generally considered a fire hazard, and insurance companies hate it. And that was really one of the first big hurdle on this. It's like, all right, we've got aluminum wiring here. Now, if you treat aluminum wiring, if it's been mitigated, it's totally fine. Like there's a special little thing you can get. So, because the problem with aluminum is when aluminum interacts with another metal type, it'll corrode, and that's what causes the fire. This is the 1970s property. So it's been working and fine for 50 years, but it did need to get mitigated. So it's like, okay, well, we've got to go in and do it. So I got 2 quotes. I played a little game. I got 2 quotes. I got one quote for full rewiring of the entire property, get rid of all the aluminum, put all new copper in, all new drywall to cover up the new copper, because you got to tear open the walls to do it. And I got that quote, and that's really big number, right? Like I think it was like $230,000 or something really big. But I also got a second quote because there's another way to mitigate aluminum wiring, and that is to use these Aluminacom connectors. They're $10 a piece. They have to go on every single wiring connection that's aluminum. So every single light switch, every single light, every single bath fan, every single outlet, all of them. So there's about 30 or 40 of them per unit, but times 10. So you're talking like $400 for materials plus the labor costs. So it's about maybe $2,200 a unit on these, which is a lot less than the full copper rewire. And so when I submitted when I went back to the seller, I sent him the full rewire quote, and I said, hey, I'm gonna have to mitigate this for insurance to even consider it, which was true. The insurance companies were like telling me I'm not going to touch this unless it's mitigated. And so I was like, look, you can either do this yourself, or you can cut the price down for me, and then I'll take it at a discount and I'll do the work on it. And keep in mind, like, part of this is psychological, right? The guy's been losing money on this for the last 2 years. So I'm saying, look, this is a handful for you. It's really painful for you. I'll take this off your hands, but I'm going to need this discount to do it. And he agreed. He said, yep, I'll take the discount. So I ended up getting this thing under contract for 1.675 when it was on the offer for 2.2 million originally. And that switch from where I had to, and then now I can get I'm going to go a little bit back to what I said before, is I was originally going to joint venture or syndicate this because I didn't have the money to do 2.2 million kind of property. But when I was able to drop it that much and knowing the returns that were built into it, my husband and I looked at it and we're like, I think we'd actually pull this off ourselves, because I'd have to sell another property to do it. But I think we could get the money to actually do this ourselves if we can get the right financing. And that was an interesting conversation because I could still have joint ventured on it. Like I stretch our personal finances a little more than I'm normally comfortable. I'm typically very fiscally conservative about that. And I stretched it more. But at the same time, if I'd done a joint venture, I would have to convince somebody else that the aluminum wiring was fine, that the insurance was fine, that all of these other pieces that were deemed a risk, I could mitigate versus I know I can, and I just go do it. And for me, that's my personality is like, I just want to go, I know I can go fix this. I know I can. And that confidence, like, luckily I've got a husband who's super supportive and he was like, yeah, let's just go do it. And my husband pretty much just runs as like, he kind of makes sure I don't do anything too silly, but he's got his MBA. So he helps like double check all my numbers and that the business plan is solid. So I actually send him a business plan. So another thing I was gonna, just as a suggestion to you guys, is when you buy a property, you write up a little investment memo and just kind of answer some questions for yourself. Like, why are you buying the property? What do you intend to do with it? What do you think the results are going to be? What are the risks? How do you mitigate those risks? And just kind of have that before you buy it. And you can always go back to that. And it gives you this idea of, this was your plan. The plan can change, but at least you can start learning, like, what is it that you were missing? Where are your blind spots over time? And then you can really get better and better rather than the plan changed and I don't remember what the original plan was. This is true on any size property, by the way. It's just a nice little, I mean, you can see it's just like a Google Docs. Like, this is not anything fancy. That was one of the points I wanted to make. But anyway, back to the property. And okay, but keep me on track if time. Also, if you guys have questions, please jump in. I prefer answering questions, to be honest, but I can talk real estate all day too.
I got a question. I got a question, Rachel. What kind of other clauses do you use in your contract? Can you give an example of some of the clauses you use in your contract to get the outcome that you want?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work in a lawyer in Charlotte that I really like, and she's helped me refine some of the clauses that are helpful to, it's not like, it's essentially saying, hey, these are the things that if as a buyer, I would love to have these in the contract. And you always start out, like typically in commercial, the buyer's the one sending the contract to the seller. And so you get to have the first negotiating point. You get to set the table for what the negotiation is going to go. And you can put all the clauses in there that help you. And then it's on them to go through and come back to you and say, this is not, like, we want to change this or we want to negotiate in this. So for instance, one of the ones is extension, how much you pay for an extension. So typically I'm used to doing 30 days due diligence, maybe, and then 30 days to closing. And then you have another, like I do it as another 30 days on top of that extension. And normally you have to pay for that extension. So you put some amount of money against another heart of money to say, yes, I'm serious about closing on this. I just need a little more time. And some people will say, oh, well, I need to put in 50K on a property like this or 35K on a property like this. I put in 5K because I got to put a little bit in there, but it's on them to come back to me and say, oh, no, I'm not comfortable with that. And I've never had anyone come back and say that's not enough for an extension, because most of the time they're not focused on how much the extension is. Some people will be, but most of the time they're focused on that top number and some of the other details and not on that. So don't make money hard. Like, don't stretch yourself more than you have to get a deal you want, is kind of the message there. Another good one is you can put a clause in there that says any unit that's not rent ready at closing, you get a credit at closing. So it can be, depending on how much it would take, you can do $3,000, you can do $5,000 a unit that's not rent ready. Now you need to define what rent ready means in the contract, like not, it's got appliances in place, it's painted, it's clean, it's essentially like listing ready. And you list out just a couple of things so that when you get to that point, your property manager or you can go walk it and say, okay, these are the things that are not, like, you can just go through the checklist and say that, yes, this is done. No, this is not done. And if even one of those things is not done, you get $5,000 for that unit. On this one, I ended up having 6 units that were not rent ready. So I got done this when I had $3,000 a unit. So I got another 12K or yeah, I'm an engineer, but I can't do math in my head. So sorry. 18K back on it. Like just, I got a credit at closing. So that was that much less I did not have to bring to closing, which also again helped me like do it on my own and give me some buffer. Right. So God, what else is there? Oh, the pest control one, I think is what I was mentioning to you. So there's one, I do one where you do a pest control inspection. Like I pay for it, right? It's normally a couple $100. It's not very expensive. They go through and they do an inspection. They do a write-up of every single unit. And in the contract, it states that the seller has to mitigate all the pests prior to, like per this list, prior to closing. And then if they don't, you either get a choice of either you can take a credit or you can delay closing without any kind of fees that way. Another one that gets used a lot, which is more time management, I guess, is in your contract. You should have an appendix of all the due diligence items you want the seller to give you, every single one of them. And then in your contract, you have a clause that says my due diligence time does not start until I get all of these documents, because I cannot review properly the whole property until I get all of these documents. And so if they take 3 weeks, like in this case, they took 3 weeks after we signed the contract to get me all those documents. So I got an extra 3 weeks of due diligence time without having to pay any extension, without even calling it an extension, because my time frame didn't even start until they got me all those documents. Now, some sellers will be on top of it. They'll give it to you day one, but having that in there can really help. Like if you're like, oh, I want it, like it's always good to have more time. Like you can always shorten the time frame and nobody gets really annoyed about that generally, unless you have a 1031 going on. But that's having that extra time as the buyer. Like you just want to create space. You want to create financial space. You want to create time space for you to find these things, get contractors out there, get everything set up, and then you can close it when it makes sense for you. I don't know, I kind of sideways, but those are a couple of things I did.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Was there a question?
Any more questions? Also, before you continue, Rachel, don't forget, everybody, this is a meetup, a networking event. So please put your name and your information in chat so people get in contact with you. Don't forget that part. I meant to mention that in the beginning. But Rachel, continue on. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. All right, so got this property. It's under contract.
Okay, before you go further, Alicia has a question. What documents are needed before due diligence starts?
Ooh, before due diligence starts. You want the whole list? Hold on. I don't know. I'm not going to read off the whole list because it's about 20 different documents. But I will say it should be everything you can think of, that every piece of information that you want to have. It doesn't, because they don't have to give it to you, right? They can just say, we don't have this, but you can ask for it. So like a survey, if they've done a survey when they bought it, you want to put in you don't even have to know that. You can just say, I want any past surveys. I want any code violation lists. I want any CapEx that have been done. I want all full financials on X, Y, and Z. I want tax returns from the past 2 years. I want this is your wish list of everything you could possibly want. And they don't have to give it to you, but they do have to say, we don't have this. Now, there are certain things where you're like, okay, you definitely have that. You just can't find it. And so I'm going to push on it. But yeah, you come up with all the things you wish you could know about the property. How old is the roof? Can you give me the receipt from when the roof was last done? Can you tell me the HVAC ages on everything? And they'll push back, but it's your chance to ask for everything that would help you understand the property better, that the seller may have that you otherwise wouldn't get access to. Does that make sense? I should probably pull up the chat so I can see the chat while I'm doing this. I don't know that I can. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's keep going. So we covered contracts. We covered the aluminum wiring. And then the other thing to look at on properties like this, and one of the reasons I originally went in as a full price offer is this has some extras to it that were not advertised in the broker's packet. So on this one, let me see if I can find the aerial view of it real quick. Almost. There it is. So on this particular property, it's kind of T-shaped. So there's 5 units up here, and then there's a bunch of units back here. And in here, there's an office building, which on a 29 unit, you really don't need an office. It's just too small to want to have on site to be able to pay for it financially. So you're pretty much going to be stuck with offsite and maybe somebody coming by once a week, twice a week to check on it. But having like an official office is actually kind of a waste of space. So this office is actually can be turned into a unit, right? So it's an additional unit. So now I've got 30 units instead of 29 units, right? And that's a huge boost. And then in the back here, and I don't have a good picture of it on this particular OM, but there's a big basement area back here that covers, it spans the entire width of this and could also be an additional unit. It's going to take some additional work because it's a maintenance closet right now and it's in the basement and it needs some effort, but it's got plumbing and it's got electrical in it. So you could definitely turn it into another unit if you went through the investment time frame. So now I've got 31 units instead of 29 units. And that's something that like the broker didn't advertise or anything like that. It's something you kind of, this is where the creative aspect of like going to the property and like seeing what's there and how I can use what's there. And then for me, on top of that, you can see this really overgrown lot back here. That's actually part of the same parcel. There used to be 16 more units back here about 30 years ago, and it's just been an overgrown lot since then. So I've got a buildable, properly zoned area that I could partner with a developer or parcel or split off and sell off to somebody later that can be an additional source of income and further make the property even better. So all 3 of those are kind of extra things that you can't, like they wouldn't be on an OM necessarily, but you start thinking about how you can use the land and the property to better benefit. And that's kind of where you can get some additional edge on some of these other people that are bidding, or in my case that had already bid and left. And so I looked at, I was one of the fun things about it. I'm really looking forward to getting that running. How did you go about finding a property manager? Ooh, that one's tough. So you have to interview a lot of people. An odd tip that you probably, like, I know I didn't think about it at first, talk to Sherwin-Williams. And that sounds really bizarre. I understand that. But Sherwin-Williams people, the Sherwin-Williams reps in the area, they know everybody. They know all the property managers. They know all the good contractors. They know all the electricians. They know all the plumbers. They know everyone. Go make friends with your Sherwin-Williams rep. They will come out to your property. They will tell you what paint colors to use for free. Like they will work with you. And they're just good to work with. And that's true in both Charlotte and Columbia. And I'm sure it's true in more places. I don't know how far Sherwin-Williams reach, but your local paint store, they make a huge margin on paint, by the way. Like everybody makes a huge margin on paint. So the people who work there are paid very well. And they have so many connections. Like go make friends with them and ask questions. Outside of that, it's talking to people that if you can find owners in the area, networking like we're doing here is really good. So the more people you know in different areas, you can kind of get a list of who they like, who they don't like. This size is really tricky because it's hard to remotely manage, or a lot of the smaller companies are not set up to really do this really excellently like you can on a big property where you have one person focused on your property. You pretty much have somebody who's looking at your property and all of these others. So I would say finding a great property manager at these kind of mid sizes is going to be really tough, but you can find a decent one to a good one, and you can self-manage it if you really want to do it. But that's kind of, those would be my recommendations. Is you can look online, you can look at the properties that they're managing. If they look like good properties, you can go visit them. When I did my rent comp analysis, I actually went to 15 different properties in the area to go see what the competition was, see who was responding. Because what you see online is not always real, right? So you can pull a rent-a-meter report, and that's all great, but it's still not always real. Typically you don't know what concessions are, like who's offering half month off, full month off rent just to get people in the door, who's offering lower income requirements to try to get people in the door. There's just different things. Like I have a whole laundry list. Did I pull that up? Hold on, give me a sec. Yeah, I did. Just gotta get there. So when I do rent comps, this is kind of the spreadsheet I use, and this is Columbia's. So this, I keep my whatever I'm working on at the top, but outside of just rent and everything, like, do they have laundry? Do they have a dishwasher, disposal, pet rent, pet deposit? How much are the utilities people are costing? Pool, playground, fitness center, business center, like all of these different things make an impact to how much rent you can charge relative to other properties, and they help you properly price your units in the grand scheme of things, because all these little things are what tenants are looking at, and so they should be what you and or your property manager are looking at.
Hey,
you
Rachel.
guys don't see it? Yeah.
No.
Oh. My sharing is paused. Why? New share. Apparently I have to share by program. Hold on.
You have to stop your sharing to go to the other.
Yeah, give it a minute. You guys see that now?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, this is a simple spreadsheet. But like I said, it's got laundry. Does it have a dishwasher? Does it have a garbage disposal? How much are pet rent, pet deposit? How much are people paying for utilities? Pest control included? Pool, playground, is it gated or not? Does it have a dog park or not? Like, I mean, you're trying to look at this as a tenant would, but with a more systematic approach. And so then I typically will look at total rent per square. I call it total rent, but essentially if I can figure out how much the utilities are, and if they have like a resident benefits package or something, I'll account for that and what the total rent is that the tenant's paying. And then you use that more than just the normal rent per square foot, because I can better understand what where this is lying. So you can see like up at the top is kind of the summary. I hide these 3 columns when I send it to the bank. This is helpful for the bank too, by the way, because it shows you've really thought about it. And so the bank actually starts believing you know what you're doing. But so I've got min, a max, and an average. And then I can look down and see, okay, the place I'm looking at is really close to the minimum. It's nowhere near the average, and it's definitely not anywhere near the max. So I'm probably got a good bit of room to go to get this up to where it makes sense. Any questions on that? Okay, cool. What else can I share? So after you do your rent analysis, make sure you do look at if there's any what was I called? The code violations. So that's something that I started including in my due diligence checklist, probably within the last year. I hadn't thought about it before on single family because I just didn't bother to look. But the code violations is the city can put a code violation on the property, and you can make it a clause in your contract that says the seller must clear those before purchasing the property. And that is one of the big reasons my due diligence took so long. So, or not due diligence, but why it took so long to close. So I went from February to June, right? Way more than 90 days. And a lot of that was because the seller was still trying to fix code violations. And the nice thing is the city is now your inspector. So the city's like the city's the one that's the bad guy here. They're doing the inspections. They're forcing them to fix stuff. And you can, like, that's actually a helpful thing. And it's not costing you anything. Like, you're just sitting there. You do have to work with your bank if you have stuff that's getting extended that long. Having a good relationship with your bank is key if you're going to have these extensions going on, especially if the interest rate's jumping around. I partnered with a bank in Charlotte called Skyla. It used to be Charlotte Metro Credit Union. They've been really helpful to work with, but they have a very limited lending capacity. And so I was lucky to get them locked down early in the year before they ran out of capacity to lend. And if you didn't realize that banks could run out of capacity to lend, they absolutely can. It's good to have multiple banks in your back pocket that you work with, because they really do, like the bigger ones like Fannie, Freddie, you don't have that problem. But for some of these smaller banks, I love working with Skylight. They've been fantastic. I really want to work with them again. But by the time I got in contract for the next one, they'd already lent out all the money that they could without violating their own internal processes. And so they're like, you're going to have to come back to us at the beginning of next year to do another one. And like, it's just that. So you have to go call some other banks and work with them. So it's an interesting thing to kind of think about. But talking to your banker, understanding like, hey, would it help them if you did a big deposit into their bank? Because a lot of times their lending is driven by the deposits in their bank. And now I'm getting off on kind of a tangent from the property itself, but is more like tips and tricks, I guess, when you're looking at due diligence and getting through this very crazy period. Is talk to your bank, understand that, hey, they are limited in what they can lend by the amount that is deposited in their bank. So if you can deposit more into their bank and say, hey, I will make you my primary lender, I'll put my business money into your bank, you can actually get better, like up on the scale of who they're going to lend to, and you can help them lend more. What was
the name of your bank again?
Skyla. It sounds like a pharmaceutical company. I really wish they'd stuck with Charlotte Metro Credit Union, but Skyla, Skyla.
I was wondering. I had not heard. I was like, that doesn't sound like a bank name.
It doesn't. It doesn't. They put TV commercials on it too. It was at first you had no idea who it was, and they like formerly Charlotte Metro Credit Union. I was like, oh guys, no. Whoever did your marketing, I'm sorry. But they've been great to work with. Like I've really enjoyed work. I would highly recommend them if you're looking for a small bank. They do just do recourse loans. So if you're looking for non-recourse, you're going to have to look elsewhere.
Yeah.
But it's like that's kind of a decision on the business side. But it is of the banks I've worked with, they've been the best.
Well, now before when you say recourse and non-recourse, for those who are not,
that's good.
Oh, that's fair. So recourse loan means the bank can come after you personally if you stop paying the bill. A non-recourse loan means the bank can take the property, but they can't come after you personally if that happens. To get non-recourse is nice because it does lower that risk, but it's typically harder to get and harder to find. And you typically have to be you have to go up to Fannie and Freddie in a lot of cases. So you're operating above $2 million in loan value to get up there, versus the smaller properties, which is mostly what I've been doing, are mostly recourse. And so they look at you, they look at the property has to perform, but they also look at you so that, because you are how they get their money back if you stop paying on their property.
Yeah.
So there's a question here. Alicia wants to know, how's the financing? The years, interest rate, things like that.
Okay. Sure. So the financing, this one I got 75% loan to value, 75% loan to cost. So if you don't know, you can get a loan for not just the property purchase price, but also the amount of money you're going to put into the property, the construction cost afterwards. So that's loan to cost. Loan to value is just purchase price. Loan to cost includes that CapEx on top of it. So I got 75% loan to cost, and that's helped me. So I'm financing the property upgrades as well as the property itself. And you can get that as long as the property appraises based on your business plan for that, right? So with the 75% loan to cost, it's a 5-year term, 25-year amortization, and the interest rate was 6.75% fixed. So I don't ever do variable rate financing. I just have a hard no on variable rate financing. For me, I'm not risk on in that way. I like knowing I'd rather pay a little bit more in interest and know what it is than have this fuzzy risk that's dependent on the market out there. Some people some people do it with great success. It's just not, it doesn't make me comfortable. This one doesn't have any prepayment penalty, which is really nice. So I could refinance it next year and I won't have to pay any prepayment penalty, which if you go to Fannie Freddie, they typically will charge you quite a bit to do prepayments early. And I also got 3 years interest only. So out of that 5-year term, I'm only paying interest only I'm paying interest only payments on the first 3 years, which helps a lot with the early financing. And that's because I'm doing a lot of work to the property and I laid out the business plan, and that's kind of, I was able to tell them, look, this makes more sense. I'll be better to be able to pay you back because after I finish the business plan in 2 to 3 years, this is where we'll be at. And they backed that up with the appraisals and with their underwriting. And yeah, it worked out. I did not buy down the rate. No, that was the rate that I got from Skyla. And like I said, I started talking to them back in February, March, and we closed in June. So again, like I said, they were really easy to work with. I was worried about the extending the time period because of the code violations, that the rate would go up, and they were able to hold it for me that whole time, which was really, really nice.
Hey, Rachel, I'm curious, do you find like any major differences with the bank versus the credit union? Or because I kind of hear that credit unions are more welcoming and just easier to do business than, say, I don't know, Bank of America or whoever.
No, that's a good point. Credit unions have more flexibility because they only report to the people in their credit union.
Yeah.
Right. And the federal government, like that too. But there's a lot less structure.
Yeah,
like
they're members.
The structure is a lot more flexible, and they want to support you a lot more. So it was, working with them has been a lot easier than, like, I worked with a couple other like banks before, and they were fine, but like just the way I could work with Skyla is super easy. Like, even stuff like for the construction draws. So when I want to take money out of my loan in order to pay my contractors,
right.
Like I said, I'm financing that. I take I get pictures, proof of work. I get the invoices. I email that with a summary, and like, I'm OCD, so I have like specific spreadsheets, and I fill those out, and it's always the same format every time. And I send that to him. He reviews it, and he funds it the next day. Like, it's just an email. And that versus like a bank typically would send somebody out to your property to walk it. So that takes a couple days to schedule. Then it takes another week for the financing department to actually approve it. So then you're paying your contractor 3 weeks after the work, and your contractor gets annoyed at you. Like, the fast, if you can pay your contractors faster, they will love working for you, and they will want to do it again and again and again.
I agree.
So I think
good stuff.
I don't know what time it is. I could talk all day about this stuff, but
hey, I have some.
Yeah, Frank.
You mind if I chime in, Lawrence?
Yeah, Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah, I have some more. I'm not sure if you're gonna go into this next, but I have more detailed questions about like how much did you expect to put per unit? What was your your stabilized value? What was your plan to raise the rents? Because raising rents on 29 tenants, like, what's that process looking like?
I'm happy to go into it. Lawrence just asked me to talk about the deal, and so I keep kind of going sideways, so I can go there next. So that doesn't bother me at all. So on a per unit basis, I quoted 3 contractors down there during due diligence, right? So I can confirm my numbers, and I ended up having 2 different contractors I awarded different scopes to. One contractor is just better at set scope. So some contractors are much more flexible. They're local, they're smaller. They can do like, I want in this unit, I want to save the cabinets, but I want a different countertop, or I want this to happen, but not that. In the next unit, it's different again. Like, they can piecemeal it. And some contractors, especially the bigger ones, are better at renovate this unit. Every unit is going to look exactly the same. Just go. And there's different price points for those. There's different reasons for using each. So for me, I ended up with interior was $12,000 a unit as my price point. I always add a 20% buffer on top of that. In addition, I had the aluminum remediation that went in there. That was about 80 grand. I think it was a little less than that, but somewhere around in there. And then I did a lot of exterior work. So I went in, like, you saw the kind of the pictures before. I'm going to share a recent picture. When you guys can see that.
Yeah.
Nice.
So this is what the property looks like now. It's totally different color, totally different feel than the previous, like, kind of faded baby blue with the random signs and stuff and things on it. And so I put paint, full exterior paint in there, and I did a landscaping. We're putting up a perimeter fence that's not on there yet, but that's going in next week. We're putting in a dog park. We're doing some more landscaping stuff as well. But generally the intent was we took down palm trees and things, but all of that On the outside part, I think that's totally like 130, I want to say, something around there. My total capex budget was 600K. So on top of the purchase price and closing costs, I have another 600K that I'm pulling from. And the nice thing about loan to cost, the way that this bank does it, and that's not true every bank, is I don't pay interest on that because I'm only paying interest on what I'm drawing on. So if I don't draw on it, I'm not paying interest on it. That's something to check for when you're talking to banks, especially if you get into bridge loans for some reason or another. They will often tell you you've pulled the whole amount up front, so you're paying interest on that whole amount. But like Skyla and some like other banks will say, oh no, you're only paying interest on what you're pulling out. And so that's been helpful for me, because obviously paying the extra interest and the extra payments is nice to lower that as long as possible. Trying to think, you wanted to go more, Matthew, what else did you want to go into? You can pull up some other stuff.
What was your stabilized price? I'm not sure. So have units been renovated?
Okay. Yeah, so 2.4 was the target total. So that was under contract originally for 2.2. The right now, or we targeted moving that rent up to 900 a month. I think that is actually going to happen next year, because there's just a lot we've got to get through on the property, and it's been so badly damaged in terms of reputation in the area that we kind of have to get the word of mouth out that this is now a nice property to live on for us to get better tenants in. And so that's part of the interest only period discussions with the bank, is to say, look, it's going to take us some time to get better tenants in here, to get the payments up. But if we can do interest only, then that gives us some more space to get rid of tenants that are not good for the property and get better, and like have some time to get better tenants in there. So you can have a higher vacancy and still make payments to the bank that way. And so that's kind of how I make sure I negotiate with the bank on that. Because you have to keep an eye on, as soon as you go into a property like this, like we had one person just up and leave. They just left. They left the door open. They just gone. I don't know where they went. We had another person that already said they were going to move out before we took over. And then she called us and was like, hey, can I keep my unit? Because I didn't know you guys were going to come in and actually fix things. Stuff like that. But being able to handle a high vacancy for 6 to 9 months after closing, and by high vacancy, I mean like 25% vacancy, like that's pretty high on a property like this, is helpful, because you're turning over the tenant base. You've got people that are used to a different style of living it's no longer going to jive with this property. And you're not like, I don't force people out unless they're a bad, like if you've got drugs, you're out. If you like have really terrible housekeeping and there's roaches and everything everywhere because there's food everywhere, you're out. But if you're generally paying your rent and on time, I'll do a slower lease up. I just prefer not to kick people out of their homes if I don't have to. Like I still need to get up to a certain level, but I'll do maximum jumps of $100 a month typically. On this property, because it was so low, I set a minimum of $700 a month. So everybody got a letter that said, if you're below $700 a month, your number is now $700 a month. Which for the area is unheard of for a 2-bedroom. Like it's still way lower than anything else anybody could get. But it's like, hey, you're at $550 a month and you should be at $900. I'm going to bring you to $700. And if you're upset about that, you have been getting away with that for years and you got super lucky. So I'm sorry, but we're going to move you up to here. But we've had that one person left, and we have 2 people that are under eviction notices because of non-payment. But otherwise, everybody signs the lease renewals. Like we haven't had any problems. But our renewals are month to month. So right now, everybody's month to month because we're still getting a handle on the property. If you had a 1-year lease before, then we will honor it. But until we get everybody up to the average rent that we're targeting, we keep everybody on month to month. So we have that flexibility, and they have that flexibility to go look for another place as well if it's not fitting with their lifestyle anymore. That's just kind of the way I manage it. Like other people go in, if you have a property that you want to do total renovations on, some people go in and ask everybody to leave so they can send the contractors in and in 2 months turn every single unit, and then you you fill it back up with brand new tenants afterwards. Like that's just another style of it. I personally don't feel right kicking people out of their homes if they're paying and otherwise being a good tenant. Like it is what it is. You're still in a nicer area than you used to be, even though you're in the same place, so you have to pay up for that. But and we are fixing things. We're making sure, like I'm adding Spectrum internet to the whole property. That's another fun thing you guys can do with larger properties. I think it's above 25 units. You can talk to your local cable provider, and often they'll do a package. So I can get internet to every single unit on here for $35 a door, standard internet and cable. If they go to the market, if they go straight to Spectrum, it's $120. So I can get everybody internet in there for $35 a month. I can turn around and charge them $70 a month for it. And they're still getting a $50 a month discount, but I'm getting some additional income on my side. And so there's other ways to do like add value where everybody wins. So you don't have to like, you're not pressing the tenants to pay you more just because you need the extra income. You can actually provide a benefit and a service to them. I'm going to stop there because I really keep talking a lot. Who has a question?
Rachel, can you stop the screen share, please?
Yes, absolutely.
So nobody has a question. I have a question. So what is a business plan? Is it going to be something you're going to hold until, or something you're going to turn around in between 3 and 7 years, or 3 and 10 years?
The original intention was it was more of a flip where we sell it after 3 or 4 years. I think I'm kind of going to see how the area turns though, because we have such good financing on it and we can refinance it. I think it's going to perform quite well that I'm keeping my options open to refinance and then hold it. I mean, you and I were talking before the recording stopped, and I always make sure I don't have to care about the macro environment to make money. So I want this property to be able to pay its bills no matter what's going on in the macro environment. That's one of the reasons I like fixed rate. And so when I run underwriting, I actually run 2 different models. I run an average case and I run I call it a low risk case, but it's essentially like if everything goes sideways, rent never goes up, vacancy jumps to 15%, and all of this other stuff goes wrong, right? Like not like everything goes to 0, but a lot of things go wrong. Can I still cover my bills? Like I may not be making money, but can I still cover the bank? Can I still cover the operating margins? Because if I can't, then I'm putting myself at risk, not just for me, but for the tenants of having to make hard choices of like, can I fix these things that need to be fixed or not? Or do I need to sell the property because I'm forced to sell the property because I literally can't afford it anymore? And I don't like being in that position. So I always make sure there's enough room there that even if interest rates go, I think on this one, I ran interest rates going to like 9.5%, vacancy going to 15%, rent not increasing for the entire time I hold it, operating costs jumping another 20%, like all of these little things that are, you can think about it as like, okay, all of that could happen, right? Like instead of thinking, oh, what are the best case that could happen? I always go, what's the worst case and what's the average case? And so for me, when I'm doing syndication, the average case is what I tell investors, but I always have the low risk case in the background for is like, hey, what happens if this happens? Like, well, here, I'll show you what, like all the bad things I've thought about going wrong. And then you can still make a decision as to whether you're interested or not.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody else have some questions? Have a question? Go ahead. Renee, Alicia.
Okay. All right. I wanted to know that when you bought the property, was it a classification on it like A, B, or C, if you understand what I'm trying to say?
I do. Those are, it's hard. Like I would classify it as a C minus personally.
As a what? A
C minus. A C,
Okay.
yeah, a C minus. So those are very like depend on the market generally. Like personally, I classify A as like brand new, everything's shiny and bright and perfect. B class is something that like a white collar worker would typically be comfortable living in. And C class is more like blue collar workers that are comfortable living in. And D class is something that just needs help. And so that's my personal read on it, but everybody that's more of a nuance. Like everybody kind of develops their own feel for it. But yeah, I have classified this as a C minus. So I'm trying to take this from a C minus property to like a C plus, maybe a B minus property. So I'm not trying to take this to A. I'm not even trying to take it to like a solid B. I'm trying to take it like up a couple, 2 or 3 levels for me. And then just offer better services.
So did the bank give it a rating, give it one of those ratings before you bought it, or that was not a consideration with them?
Yeah, they don't look at the ratings, but they
Okay.
do look at your underwriting. So I had to send them I sent them my underwriting, and then they did their own. I also sent them my business plan, and because I got the capital, the improvements financed too, I had to tell them this is how much I'm spending on each of these different things, and here's how much I'm having contingency, which is just extra, right? I've got it 20% on top of what I thought I was going to spend in case something goes wrong, and stuff always goes wrong.
Okay.
Just to be clear.
When you said underwriting, I know what it is, but could you just be just a tad bit, not a
Yeah.
lot, but a little specific in your case? Because you said I had to send in the underwriting, and that's something I always thought that was something that the bank did, that wasn't anything that we as investors would do. So what do you mean by that?
So it's the numbers you run for your
Mhm.
to show what your investment return, and are you going to be able to make payments to the bank? Like the bank cares
Okay.
about whether you can make payments to them, but you also, it's not just about the bank. It's, can you pay your contractors? Can you pay maintenance? Can you pay property manager?
Okay.
So I use the Adventures in CRE model. You can find it online, a.cre.com. I love them. They're very detailed though. Like, to be frank, like I said, that's my style. On this one, I'm just gonna pull up one of the old ones.
Rachel, you said Adventures in CRE?
Yeah, Adventures in CRE, commercial real estate investing, Adventures in CRE. Yeah, Spencer Burton does. He this is his side. Like, he loves underwriting, and it's his side gig. Like, he loves it.
I remember.
He's got 50 different models on there, all different reasons and things, and it's definitely, he has classes and stuff too if you want to go down there. He's got videos to help you learn how to use the models. It's really a good resource if you don't already have like a solid underwriting model. But I think maybe I'll just show you guys real quick.
Okay.
I'm going to show you what I sent to the bank, which may, like, this is not going to be the Adventures in CRE, but it may be clearer because I have to summarize the Adventures in CRE model for the bank's purposes. So this is what I sent to the bank. Can you guys see this spreadsheet?
Nothing there.
Yeah.
Nothing
Okay.
there. Rachel.
Nothing there.
I can see it.
I can see
No,
it.
it's there.
You can
It's
see it?
there.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. So this is an old one.
That's
It's
fine.
not the latest. This came down another couple hundred, but I just want to give you a sense of what it looks like. So purchase price, this is my renovations budget, 20% on top of that. These are the acquisition fees, development fees. And so the total amount of capital I would need, the whole amount of money I would need to buy it is this amount. And so then 75% of this is what I'm asking the bank for to lend to me. And then on top of that, in reserve, as not financed, is I've got 30K working capital. So that's just in case I need it, so I can pay people before the bank, as the bank draw, if there's a delay or something. It's just good to have. It's always good to have a reserve. Acquisition costs are pretty large. This was back when I thought I was going to do a syndication, so I've got 20 grand in there for an SEC attorney. Another reason I decided not to syndicate it is I didn't have to pay them 20 grand. But you've got origination fees. I had to do, I forgot to mention. So the banks typically require you to do an environmental test. It's called a phase 1 to see if there's anything wrong with the property. This property failed its phase 1. And so I had to get a phase 2 done, which was $7,500. So I paid this $3,500 and another $7,500 to do a phase 2, which is where they actually go take like soil samples and vapor measurements of your property to check if you have any issues. So in top of the aluminum wiring, it's also had environmental issues going on, and it was losing money and all of these things that a lesser determined person would probably have failed. So being determined can be good. Sometimes it's not, but I think in this case, it's going to work out for me. But you can see, like, even the acquisition costs add up quite a bit. And then I break out like capital expenses. So exterior, interior, and additional improvements. So I think Matthew was asking earlier, he may have dropped off. But like this is kind of, there's 137 for exterior, interior. I kind of break it out a little bit for the bank, but it's not as detailed as I have it elsewhere from the contractors. It's just trying to give them a sense of, yeah, I thought about all of this. And then I give them a 5-year cash flow view. So this comes straight out of my adventures in CRE underwriting. I really just like copy paste it in here. And then it's really just copy paste. And so it tells them, this is where like the underwriting piece comes in, is like, okay, repairs and maintenance, how much you're paying in payroll, marketing, all these different things. Are you accounting for all of those? And are you still getting cash out at the end of the day after all of that stuff? So when I say underwriting, like this is kind of I do a much more detailed version of this for the investors in CRE, but are you taking into account all the different things like expenses and income side of things so that the bank gets confidence and you have confidence you're actually going to make money on this once you buy it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. No
Out
worries.
of curiosity, what was your GP LP split if you were to syndicate?
So I typically do a 75-25 split when I do syndications, 25% GPs, 75% to the LPs. And then within that, I minimized something I shouldn't have minimized. Where did Zoom go? Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
There it is. Okay.
Mhm.
Yes.
I hit a button and I was trying to minimize some stuff and I minimized you all. Yeah, I typically do 75-25. And then the GP split really depends on the team. I've actually worked with a different team on every syndication I've done so far. So I haven't found my forever team yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so every time it's a negotiation, which is it takes a little more time to do that kind of negotiation, but it's totally worth doing up front as early as possible and writing it down. So everybody's very clear on what that split is and what it means and who's responsible for what and who's getting what after close.
Okay. Is your property management company also managing the rehab process, or are they just dealing with the tenants?
They're doing tenants and maintenance. I'm managing the capital improvements. Yeah, that's a good question. So your property manager can do capital management typically. At this size, I find that they are not very good at it. They're fine, but they're just distracted. Like that's not their main thing. It's not their main property. And so I hired 2 general contractors. And so I'm managing them and then they're managing their subs. I have done it where I manage the subs and I cut out the GC and I save some money, but I spent a lot more time doing it. And so it really just depends on where you are in your real estate journey. If you have the money to pay for somebody to help you manage all the subs and to source the material, like sourcing materials is a pain. Like just be frank, you got to source them. You have to do the logistics to get them there. You have to do inventory so things don't disappear. You have to have all of these systems in place versus hiring a GC that's going to do all of that for you and follow up with the subs and be responsible if things go missing. Like it really just depends on what level you want to be involved and how much time and effort you want to put into it, how much time you want to spend to save a certain amount of money.
Understood.
So,
Thanks.
Rachel,
Yeah.
So you're managing the contractors and the upgrade, and how often do you go down there to see what's going on, or do you have somebody else to look at it and verify what's being done?
I have a bit of both. So I go down there once a week. I don't do that once it's stable, but right now I'm going down there about once a week to check on things, make sure stuff's moving. People are doing their jobs essentially. That's why I like having stuff nearby. I do get proof of work photos from the contractors and from the property manager. Like the property manager does inspections for me. Like they just went through and inspected every single unit and posted it all in AppFolio. So now we can go back and look through all those photos online and see, okay, this is what each of the units look like in detail and everybody can see it. But at the same time, there's nothing to like, you just can't see everything in photos. You kind of have to go there to really experience how the tenants are experiencing it. And it just makes a world of difference when you show up and like the grass isn't cut or something like that. And you're like on the phone with the property manager, like, I'm here this is a problem. Like they're like, oh, okay, we'll get it fixed like right now versus like, yeah, it's a different dynamic. When they see you care, like my general perspective on things is if you care, if you show you care, other people will start caring. Tenants, property managers, contractors, whatever. If you care, they will care. If you don't care, or if you don't show them you care, like you're like, I do care, but I haven't talked to you in 3 months. Like they don't think you care because you haven't talked to them in 3 months. If you're emailing them back within 24 hours when they ask you a question and like they're clearly some kind of priority for you, they will tend to pick up on that and respond better to you as well. Because keep in mind, there are really bad owners out there, like the one I just bought this property from, that don't put any money into their properties or talk to the property manager. And the property manager's just like, I'm stuck. Like the tenants hate them. The owner won't give them money to do anything. And the property manager gets stuck in the middle. And so when they come across somebody who's actually going to talk to them and answer their questions and respond to them and actually give them money to fix things, like you don't give them everything. Like they just, like if you just gave them all the money, they would just fix everything and you would not make any money, to be honest, because most property managers don't have that business sense at this size. Like the bigger ones do, but the littler ones are like, but at the same time, like you listen to them and you say, okay, that's a good idea, or no, this is why I don't think that, I don't want to do that right now, but thanks for bringing it up to me, and if you find something else like that, let me know. Like that's kind of how I treat it.
What utilities are paid by the tenants, or is that included in their like the water basically? But what utilities do you pay, if any?
On this one, I pay for water right now. Tenants cover electricity. There is no gas, so we don't have to worry about that. Tenants currently cover like the internet, but I will soon be doing, like in October, that kicks in to where that switches over to where I'm paying for internet and then they pay me. And so, but it really differs on every property. So I charge, like the previous owner was not charging for water. I will charge for water. In South Carolina, you can do RUB system. North Carolina, you cannot. You have to get it metered. You have to go talk to Guardian Water Services. They're the biggest one I know of. But be aware of your local laws before you start charging people for utilities, because there are definitely laws around it in most states.
Before you continue, Rachel, please tell people, some people don't know, because this is a meeting where some people are just getting started. What are RUBs?
Ratioed utility billing service, I think is the correct one. It might be system instead of service. Don't quote me on that. But RUBS is where you can ratio it might be ratio utility billing service. Anyway, I'm really bad at acronyms. But it's where you can say, okay, this is my total property water bill. And you can partition that out and say, okay, this many 2 bedrooms, this many 3 bedrooms, this many 1 bedrooms, and you can ratio the water bill to the tenants and charge them for it, without having to go through without having to individually meter each unit. Right? That's works in South Carolina. It works in a number of other states, typically very red states, very blue states. That's not typically a thing. North Carolina, being half and half, does not allow it, but they do allow you to get individual metering. And so you can do it a couple different ways. You can either pay the utility company to install individual meters, or you can go through a system like Guardian, which installs on the hot water. For North Carolina, it's on the hot water pipe, a digital readout, so they can see how much hot water the tenant is using. And North Carolina allows them to then bill back the tenant based on their hot water usage. Don't get me why. Don't ask me exactly how that legislation got passed, but yeah, talk to your property manager or look it up before you start charging for it. But if people aren't charging for water, then it's something you can look into in order to recoup some costs or raise your rents. Like that becomes a marketing thing, right? Like you can raise the rent and say water's included, or you can keep the rent low and say we're adding a fee for water. And which one you use depends on how you want to market the property. Some tenant bases respond better to like a lot of times people are looking for the lowest rent when they're looking at, you go on Zillow, you search for 2 bedrooms under $800 a month. And if you are at $825 because you included water, you're now filtered out. So a lot of, I tend to do the rent and then add the fee on top of it versus the other way, or if it's the higher rent, because I don't think tenants value it as much as it actually costs.
Well, Rachel, I'm gonna respect people's time. I know you got kids in the house.
They're asleep. My husband's probably getting ready for bed at this point.
Okay, well, I was just want to say
I
thank
definitely appreciate all of the details and everything. I really
Hey.
do appreciate this. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. I talk fast, but I love this stuff. Like I'm happy to answer questions. And like I said, I started out not knowing any of this stuff. And so I've learned a lot the past couple of years. And I'm happy to share it because there's a lot out there for everybody.
you put your number and your contact information in the chat, Rachel.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I can do that.
So you did a fantastic job. This is an awesome presentation.
Awesome.
Awesome presentation. But before we stop this recording, right? I would like everybody, please turn your cameras on. I'd like to take a picture of all those here. That's what I want. So Bridget Smith, come on, come on, Matthew. Bethel, are you there, Bethel? That's what I see. Rachel's getting ready. She knows.
Oh, yeah. Hold on. Hold on. I'm gonna do this.
See, Rachel's
You'd
been
be a surprise. Like, there you go. I gotta get the logo in there because I'm very proud of this vest because it's like I actually have a logo. So anyway, it's silly stuff like that. It's like I have a logo. I feel proud now. Christine knows. She's laughing.
There you go. Make sure I'm gonna get your whole head in there. So back there you go. Okay, everybody on the count of three, the big smile. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. One more time again. Let's see. Come on, Matthew. Let's go. One more time again. 1, 2, 3.
Jeez.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you very much. Rachel, I'm gonna tell you again, you did a really.
Yeah, that was great. Great info, Rachel.
I enjoyed it.
You covered
Thank you. I'm glad to help.
You covered everything that I was hoping you covered. One more thing.
I set the bar for Brian next time. You gotta tell him.
Right? Because next time we're gonna have some other guests on. As a matter of fact, next week's guest is right here amongst us in one of these squid. Right?
It'll be me.
Yay, Christine!
About her journey in real estate, right?
Yeah.
Also, right? So stay tuned for next week. Be here next week, right? And you don't have to go, but I just want to stop the recording, right? You can ask us some other questions. Maybe she get down and dirty, right? Because everybody know everything, right? So once again, my name is Lawrence Light, also as Mr. International, host of Financial Independence to Small Multifamily Investing. Let me say it slower. Host of Financial Independence to Small Multifamily Investing. Thank you again, Rachel, for coming on. Appreciate you. Once again, you did an awesome job. I
love being here.
I'm really happy for you. I remember when you first started the Zoom thing, and look at where you come to right now. So I wish that you have. I pray that you have more success in this real estate journey. And thank you for sharing experience, strength, and hope tonight. Everybody, thank you. Recording out.